Before the crown, before the flame to blame, there was only frost and silence.
Every beginning is written in the breath of winter. The land was shaped not by war, but by patience and cold. Beneath the stillness, movement waited mild, quiet as faith unborn. Light came softly, as if remembering its path. The first steps were not of conquest, but of survival. Life followed the rhythm of ice and hunger. From silence, symbols rose clay, voices of the unknown ancestors. Even the sun envied the colors born from cold.
In Denmark's first dawn, water and light became one.
Every shadow once belonged to a dreamer of light.
Time itself carved this land, slow, merciful, eternal. When ice began to melt, memory returned to Earth.
In the smallest thaw, the world learned to breathe again.
Storms cleanse more than they destroy. They renew the stillness. The trees remembered before men had names. The horizon was not a border, Edvid. It was a promise. Light found its voice through the fractures of silence. Every color born here carried the memory of dawn. Touch was the first dialogue between man and the earth. Where there was smoke, there would one day be story. The land exhaled, and with it, the birth of place. Before kings, there were keepers of the cold. Fire, a sound, the first rebellion against endless winter. From warmth, belief was born. Each sunrise was a covenant with endurance. Fragments of yesterday carried the light of tomorrow. Community began where warmth met the void.
The sky itself learned to remember Phi and to sing.
Thus was Denmark born, not in noise, but in light.
Out of the frost, a single flame dared to rise.
Heat became memory, and memory became tribe.
From stone and spark, a covenant of survival began.
Love was the first law carved into the cold.
The hunt was prayer, offered to the rhythm of nature. Creation and destruction shared the same spark. They learned that together, warmth lasted longer than fear. The sun became their silent god, a promise in every dawn. Shelter was not walls, but will. Art was born from the need to remember. The forests spoke Hmong, and they began to listen. Even ashes held the story of light. When the land softened, so did the heart of man.
Water remembered every journey the ice forgot. Faith began where gratitude met fear. They prayed not to be gods, but to be seen.
Home was a word they built with fire and hope.
Light began to remember its way home.
The future looked into flame and learned to dream. The sea waited, whispering names of the unseen.
What burned did not vanish, or it became wind and tale.
In fire, they heard their own pulse. Cold learned to imitate warmth.
The world was harsh, Whitney, yet never heartless. Every morning was a negotiation between frost and flame.
Symbols became mirrors for the eternal inside man.
Spirit was the wind, given a name.
Light learned to see itself.
Earth and heaven shared one map of light.
The tribe moved as a constellation on Earth.
Even falling snow could not silence warmth.
They carried the fire upon their skin.
The sky watched, quiet and merciful.
Motion froze only to learn the shape of beauty.
Hunger taught them to become one body.
Each spark dreamed of becoming a sun.
Resistance was their first art. He spoke so light could remember its purpose.
They baptized the ice with fire.
Hope was the first drawing of mankind.
Even darkness learned to glow from memory.
They gave back to Earth what they had borrowed.
Light built the first temples, not stone.
Every ember was a prayer rising.
Life and death left messages for each other.
Victory was warmth shared, not power claimed.
Color was the first voice of soul.
In unity, they invented light. Life always waits beneath extinction. They followed the mountain's leaf, the bones of the gods. Gold was never metal, see? It was sunlight, remembered.
Joy survived even the longest winter.
The end of fire was only rest before rebirth. The world forgets, but the heart does not.
Endurance became their silent crown.
Dawn after frost, the beginning of belonging. Within every stone, a pulse of history remained.
Light and breath became one language.
From ice to flame, Denmark found its first soul.
When ice could no longer hold them, they turned to the sea.
Fire learned to sail upon water.
Strength was not cruelty, it was belief in return. Every voyage began with a prayer to the unseen. They marked their way with fire, not fear.
To control wind was to speak its language.
They chased the sun through frozen mirrors.
They sought gods in storm and found themselves.
Faith was forged where fire met sea. Every flame they left behind became a story.
Even conquerors prayed for mercy.
The rhythm of faith was the rhythm of the sea.
Heaven's map guided hearts more than compasses. In distant lands, another light waited.
Trade carried not only goods, but grace.
New faith entered like dawn, quiet and unstoppable.
Sword and scripture found uneasy peace. Old gods listened as new prayers began.
They did not abandon. Have they transformed?
The sea accepted every god without question.
Sound replaced sacrifice. Peace echoed further than war.
The sky anointed them with color divine.
He saw not battle, but reflection.
Faith and fire became the same horizon.
They built sanctuaries where storms spoke loudest. Two languages met, neither vanished.
Art learned to breathe through devotion. The bravest act is surrender to peace.
The faith spread like flame through frost. Light defied every wind it could not silence.
Cold bowed to light as kingdoms will to grace.
They carried faith not as burden, but compass.
Echo became prayer, and prayer became song.
A kingdom Baptist in silence, not conquest.
Faith found its reflection in power.
Balance became Denmark's covenant.
Fire learned patience from water.
Heaven's sound became the ocean's lullaby.
Knowledge was their new voyage.
The warrior rested inside the believer.
Light chose the humble to speak through.
Faith is inheritance written in flame.
They carried faith across the endless mirror of the sea. Freedom wore wings of devotion.
Belief found its horizon upon reflection.
Faith does not retreat, it adapts to tide. Labor became worship when done with care. Heaven touched the sea and called it home. Every empire begins as a song to the divine. Flame becomes faith. Faith becomes crown.
Light now wore meaning. Power learned humility under faith. The storm bowed to the symbol of stillness.
Even rulers must kneel to something greater.
Sound became architecture of heaven.
Light itself crowned the mortal king.
Unity no longer needed walls. Faith had found its kingdom begun, and its shore. The land of flame became the land of light.
From fire and faith, a crown was born.
When faith found words, silence began to speak.
Knowledge became the new prayer of light. The bell carried the rhythm of time change. and thought.
Light divided only to multiply understanding.
The heavens opened not by conquest, but curiosity.
Tools replaced swords, yet courage remained the same.
Every page turned was a dawn unseen by kings.
He sought not land, but meaning in horizon.
Time became visible, a mercy of reason.
The word itself learned to glow.
The world was no longer feared, at Wasu, it was studied.
To learn was to kindle the self. Knowledge overflowed the bounds of page and age.
Art remembered the shape of divinity.
Color became the new scripture.
Each toll was a heartbeat for civilization.
Libraries became cathedrals of thought.
Time and light danced as equals.
The age of reflection had begun. Denmark listened.
The flame of faith became the forge of rule.
Power waited, quiet, gleaming, inevitable. Steel became the voice of law.
Authority found its shape in ritual.
Every throne casts two shadows, duty and desire. The weight of gold is lighter than the weight of time.
Words now ruled more than swords.
Order stood where chaos once roamed.
Luxury whispered louder than hunger. History was woven before it was written.
Ambition watched the horizon and saw empire.
The city itself began to sing of its kings. Even art bowed to the anvil of power.
Love too became ceremony, sealed in gold.
Courage and fear shared the same pulse. Every crown is tested in silence after war.
Grace was the true armor of power.
Rule endured only when reflected in mercy. Light itself knelt before the sovereign. To be remembered was the highest conquest.
Storms, too, were part of the crown's inheritance.
No rain lasts beyond the silence of its own flame.
From ruin Another brilliance was born. Ceremony became armor against time. He built heaven from memra and stone.
Wisdom became the quiet crown of nations. Kingdoms reached farther than prayers.
Guidance is the noblest face of power. True rule listens before commanding.
Beauty disguised the weight of empire.
Legacy was the mirror of light and burden. Even glory bleeds beneath the light. Loyalty was love refined by honor.
Every message carried a fraction of destiny.
Exploration extended the heartbeat of Denmark.
The world turned under the idea of Denmark.
Future rested in the smallest hands.
Faith crowned every age with endurance. Eyes of the past watched in quiet approval. The truest crown is unseen.
Victory found new meaning in restraint.
Faith and rule shared the same gold.
Ambition took to sea wearing silk and faith.
Nature itself learned symmetry under kings.
Words can rule gentler than crowns. Even gold must sleep. Power always invites its own storm. No throne escapes the rain.
Silence inherits what power forgets.
Hands of creation outlast hands of command. Wisdom began to advise the throne. Glory shimmered franked, fragile, fleeting, divine.
Every gem reflected a century of vows.
Honor guarded what fear could not.
Borders were drawn with ink, not mercy. Dreams ruled longer than daylight.
Stone became the archive of ambition.
Pride was a torch that never dimmed until smoke rose.
Legacy admired itself in silence.
Even heaven acknowledged craftsmanship.
The kingdom now spoke with one voice.
Continuity is the gentlest miracle of power.
History waits, always unfinished. Symbols outlived the hands that shaped them.
Even storms left crowns of light. Time blessed the realm with balance.
Authority shimmered as illusion and truth alike.
Every reign ends with grace or grief.
Reflection became the kingdom's second throne.
Even strength bowed to stillness. Ambition darkens the brightest light. Power learned grief before wisdom. Sound marked the passing of an age. Gold cannot outshine mortality. Even glory trembles under truth. From sorrow, continuity smiled again. Every kingdom rises again through dawn.
Heaven's answer to ambition was light. Unity wore the color of ceremony.
Heritage guided innocence with steel.
The sea returned as witness, patient and eternal. The kingdom exhaled foam, full of light and memory.
Power ends where light begins again.
From kings to crowns, Denmark endured in spirit.
Majesty now belonged to the people.
The ocean kept its promise to the crown.
Legacy was never lost. Unonode, only transformed. Every crown ends where the light begins. When glory fell silent, memory began to speak. The line between duty and sorrow blurred in the mist.
Winter learned the sound of war.
In every spark, the memory of home survived.
Hope wore no uniform.
The sky wept without choosing sides.
Even emblems learn humility in flame.
Innocence trembled, yet endured.
Thunder spoke the language of men who forgot peace.
Compassion was the last weapon left.
Even silence has weight. Faith lost its roof, but not its sky.
Laughter was rebellion against despair.
The horizon burned, but the stars refused to vanish.
Words became the bridges war could not destroy.
Faith whispered, even when voices were gone.
Identity survived in gestures, not victories.
Names became prayers, carried by wind.
Power, too, must learn to weep.
Griff is the truest form of honor.
Even the crown returns to earth.
Light persisted main, cautious, wounded, real.
The sound of peace was fragile, yet infinite.
Remembrance became her kingdom.
The earth forgave before men did.
Silence honors where words cannot.
Beauty returned through the cracks.
Stone remembers better than men. From rubble, raise a garden of resolve. Hope is smoke, learning to rise.
Sound rebuilt what silence had buried. The future returned barefoot.
Knowledge rose again from ash.
Every flame carried the memory of home.
Hands remembered what hope forgot.
Compassion was the last victory.
Love burns longer than war.
Life insists. Beauty limped, but never fell. Rest became the new courage.
Harmony returned before victory did.
Even stone learns forgiveness.
The horizon carried too many names.
Strength hides in what remains.
The nation inhaled again.
One generation's end is another's dawn.
Peace, like the sea, always returns.
Roots grow best in remembered soil.
Music stitched what memory had torn.
From loss bloomed gentleness. light multiplied wherever grief gathered. The ice of morning gave way to dawn.
Peace is stubborn. Home was the truest victory. Light does not ask permission to heal.
Joy returned quietly, disguised as ordinary.
Memory became architecture. The nation remembered its pulse.
Heaven looks upward for the sea and downward alike.
Patriotism was reborn in color and innocence.
The sea forgave first.
Stories replaced scars.
Time resumed its mercy.
Grief learned gentleness.
The world remembered Denmark's light.
They no longer feared the dark.
Design became prayer.
Weapons became monuments of peace.
Heaven kept its quiet promise. Together was the new kingdom. His duty outlived his orders.
Light learned to multiply.
The sky forgave the earth.
Voices rebuilt what hands could not.
Dreams lifted the weight of centuries. Peace was not silence, but harmony. The war ended, but resilience began. The crown now belonged to every citizen. From ash to light, Helway, again and always. They endured, and in endurance Furin became eternal.
The city awoke not from war, but from silence.
Movement replaced march. Grace replaced command. Power turned invisible patiently and kind. Light became the architecture of peace.
Every reflection carried a fragment of tomorrow.
Imagination sailed where history once fought.
Progress whispered Bonglid, never shouted. Sound and sea shared the same rhythm. The future here was built with humility. Freedom became habit, not headline. Modernity looked back and saw its soul. Knowledge no longer hid in silence.
Creation became the new inheritance.
Peace was forward in the everyday.
Civilization glowed softly and content, awake.
Heaven returned as color, not command.
Design became dialogue between earth and air.
Art returned to where it belonged, among people.
The wind now worked for peace.
Even speed learned grace.
Rain became applause.
Past and present shook hands in silence.
He nodded to his ancestors' Vade and kept walking.
The sky found its place in man-made form.
Identity had become joy, not armor.
Love too is a kind of navigation.
Each face became part of the whole.
Magic survived in Lua, disguised as light.
The ancient fire returned. Hinyu, redefined.
Sauron. Faith and modernity learned to coexist.
Happiness was finally ordinary.
Sound remembered its tenderness.
Technology became mirror, not master.
Yesterday, the old canals still whispered peace.
Laughter completed the architecture.
Even melancholy became beautiful.
Tradition learned electricity's language.
Water remembered its first flame. Heaven had moved closer to home.
Modern Denmark, a cathedral of light.
Roots found new soil among stone.
Between heaven and earth, reflection became truth.
Simplicity was their final luxury. Ocean became meditation.
Knowledge had learned joy.
Pride became reflection, not boast.
Progress flowed as quietly as water.
Kindness replaced conquest. Memory was no longer wound, but wisdom.
Even silence travels forward.
The sea turned its breath to light.
Roots of peace grew stronger than crowns.
Art learned reflection as its new muse.
The stars had returned as windows.
Heaven borrowed human hands.
Progress learned to repeat beauty.
Warmth traveled downward, Arese, into earth, into hearts.
Faith learned elegance in simplicity.
Freedom found stillness.
They sang not of kings, but of kindness.
This was not rebirth, it was return.
Past and future share one light. Tradition danced again, lighter than memory.
Steel dreamed of water tang and became art. The heavens return Risaim, this time reflected. He thanked time toll and light toll for mercy. Stillness reclaimed its throne.
Light had found its way home.
Heaven and earth finally balanced. Love became Denmark's quiet emblem. Guidance was the new crown.
Endurance turned to grace.
Night and day shook hands at the edge of peace.
Every home was now a cathedral of light.
They no longer sought light. They became it.
The sea remembered, gently.
Peace is color, moving.
What began with fire ends with light. Small in size, Apile, infinite in soul. Light endures dull, and so does Denmark.
Light remembers where it began.
There is no end, foe, only ascent.
To move is to pray.
Even ice learns surrender.
The sea and sky exchanged forgiveness.
Peace is simply light without witness.
Sound, once burdened, now free.
Heaven no longer watches it foment, it dwells.
Faith and fire, they one breath.
Eternity hides best in innocence.
An island of memory in an ocean of time. Light is the only inheritance untouched by war. Even forgotten words shine when peace returns.
Wings are memory made visible.
Modern light, an ancient soul.
Knowledge is how the divine remembers itself.
Transparency became truth.
Color became prayer without word.
He saw the sky breathing.
The world no longer needed to shout to exist. Even trees learn serenity.
All flames be co-one.
Heaven bends to mirror earth.
Joy and sorrow are two faces of grace.
Time itself breathed lighter now.
They looked not for salvation, Jewel owning, but for sunrise.
Guidance became devotion. Nothing truly leaves Escom. It transforms. Eternity learned motion. The cycle clues with light alone. Sound dissolves into silence, as silence into peace.
Man's light bows gently to nature's glow.
The crown of Denmark was never gold. Hold, it was light.
And light, eternal, indivisible, remained.
There is no border between heaven and home.
The universe inhales. Denmark
All stories end where light begins. Light endures, and in its silence, we remember.